Contrary to popular belief, I don't like being negative. If I was present at AEW's recent team meeting, I would have been crying, saying I wish we could all get along like we did in middle school, and I wish I could bake a cake made out of rainbows and smiles and everyone would eat it and be happy, while Max Caster yells from the back that I don't even go there. Unfortunately, AEW has had more than its fair share of negative moments in its very brief history. For the first couple of years, these moments seemed like outliers, problems to be dealt with, but not a representation of the perpetually optimistic and wholesome all-friends wrestling, as many began calling it. But then the calendar ticked over to 2022, and Jesus Christ, has all the positivity been sapped out of this once cheerful gaggle of Canadian geese. Of course, there is still loads to be positive about in AEW. The emergence of the Acclaimed, Wheeler Yuta, Daniel Garcia, and Ricky Starks has been a joy to watch. The Elite storyline continues to pull at our collective heartstrings, and I personally cannot get enough of William Regal lusting over Excalibur in the most gentlemanly way possible every week. But those things are for a different list. Time to inject some venom. I'm Tempest, hailing from partsFUNknown, and these are the 17 biggest AEW scandals so far. But before we get on with our list, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and enable notifications so you don't miss a fun wrestling list unlike this one. The next one will be a lot more cheerful, I promise. Number 17, Susan G. Komen. Wrestling fans will know Susan G. Komen as WWE's regular charitable collaborator for breast cancer research and awareness, aka the reason WWE had pink ropes 1 month a year during the 2010s. Unfortunately, the foundation is also known for some less desirable things as well, such as using donation money to target other charitable foundations with legal action, and AEW fans did not react well when the company announced their partnership with the charity in 2021, nor did CM Punk, and AEW was quick to sever ties with Susan G. Komen before partnering with the Breast Cancer Research Foundation. It was still very strange how AEW failed at this bit of PR, neglecting to do the proper research on the foundation beforehand. Number 16, Brian Cage and Melissa Santos. One of the bigger flops in AEW, both literally and figuratively, has been Brian Cage. Debuting at Double or Nothing 2020 as the winner of the Casino Ladder match and the first client of Taz, Cage soon plateaued in AEW's mid-card, never winning a match on pay-per-view. By mid-2021, he was booted from Team Taz and floundering as a babyface and was soon taken off TV, where he has remained with the slight exception of one very nonchalant appearance during a Jonathan Gresham segment, and oh, we'll get to him. His 2021 run did not sit well with his wife, Melissa Santos, who took to Twitter the week of All Out 2021 to say Cage was a superstar and was being misused by AEW. This was received impeccably by wrestling Twitter, as everything always is. Whether this was a direct cause or not, Cage's absence lined up with these comments and was a low point for AEW during the biggest week of their history. Number 15, Willie Urbina mocks Hikaru Shida. Hikaru Shida was given the very unenviable task of carrying the AEW Women's Championship during the cursed era of wrestling that we're all collectively trying to put out of our minds. Even though the No Fans era will never be watchable on the same level as Yes Fans wrestling, Shida did a fantastic job and was awarded with a newer, bigger championship belt on the final Dynamite before Double or Nothing 2021. This was a really special segment that was unfortunately tainted by Spanish commentator Willie Urbina mocking Shida with a racist voice for precisely zero reason. Naturally, this caused an uproar on Twitter and Urbina was quickly fired as a result. Also, a personal you to Willie Urbina because I promised on last week's list that this one would have 100% less racism, and now that isn't true, so you've made a liar out of me, Willie Urbina. Number 14, Sadie Gibbs and Bea Priestley shoot on each other. From the infant days of All Elite Wrestling, before they had ever aired one episode of Dynamite, they had already had their first bit of controversy. Sadie Gibbs and Bea Priestley, now NXT's Blair Davenport, competed in the first Women's Casino Battle Royal on the buy-in of the inaugural All Out pay-per-view in 2019, and oh boy does this need some context. Prior to this, Sadie Gibbs had left a Stardom tour because of a family bereavement, which didn't sit well with Will Ospreay, who accused her of a lack of professionalism. He has since admitted that this was super immature on his part and has said that Gibbs has forgiven him, but at the time, Will and girlfriend Bea Priestley were not happy. This resulted in the Battle Royal going awry, with Priestley beating Gibbs with a kick before loudly yelling, "Stupid! Stupid!" like a 2010 Randy Orton, and then as Gibbs fired up and hit a gorilla press slam, Priestley completely no-sold the move. This led to Gibbs taking a swing at Priestley backstage as the fight was quickly broken up, but it just goes to show AEW has been having backstage fights for as long as they have been a thing. Number 13, Ivelisse no sells. Another of the most disliked performers in women's wrestling is former Tough Enough, NXT, Lucha Underground, Impact, WCPW, and AEW star Ivelisse, who seemingly has been disliked in each and every one of those promotions. During her time in AEW, however, she got on the bad side of many, with some of that heat stemming from this incident in late 2020. During a match on Dynamite with then NWA Women's Champion Thunder Rosa, Ivelisse wasn't happy that Thunder Rosa was leading the match, and shoot strikes were thrown. You might not notice the violence if you're not paying attention, but it is impossible to miss the most unprofessional part of the match, where Thunder Rosa snapmares Ivelisse to the mat, and she responds by wiping the hair from her face and waiting to be put in a full Nelson, with about as much energy as a tranquilized sloth. Ivelisse was not long for the AEW world, and this display of unprofessionalism played a large role in her exit. Number 12, Jimmy Havoc is fired. I thought about including the fight that Jimmy Havoc and Excalibur had after All Out 2019, but they squashed that beef, and Tony Khan himself said he'd seen better fights on a soccer pitch, so perhaps there isn't much of a scandal there. Unfortunately, Jimmy Havoc also had to be shown the door at All Elite Wrestling, however his release came during the Speaking Out movement. On June 19, 2020, it was announced that Havoc would be attending counseling and undergoing rehabilitation after allegations were made that he had physically assaulted a fan and engaged in domestic abuse, with AEW stating that his status with the company would be reevaluated upon his completion of his treatment. Havoc was then released from the company on August 13th and has not wrestled since. Number 11, Max Caster's worst rap. When he isn't telling me that I don't even go here, Max Caster is doing a tightrope walk on the line of what is acceptable to say in wrestling. The problem with walking a tightrope in front of an audience is sometimes you fall. During the August 3rd, 2021 episode of AEW Dark, Caster decided to skip the tightrope altogether and just jump off the cliff, with his rap making reference to Olympian Simone Biles' mental health issues, the famous Duke lacrosse sexual assault case, and COVID testing, while making a sexual joke about Julia Hart, who at the time was 19 years old. Somehow this rap still made air despite being on a taped show, with Tony Khan calling the rap terrible and effectively suspending Caster for the following month, while saying he was personally taking over the editing of Dark going forward. Caster was put on the shelf for a month, returning for the Dark Elevation tapings on September 1st. Number 10, Jeff Hardy is arrested. This is especially difficult to talk about because I personally love Jeff Hardy, and he's the man that got me into wrestling in the first place. However, Jeff Hardy's AEW run was barely able to get off the ground. After a solid showing in the Owen Hart Cup, including a ridiculous match with Darby Allin and a great match with the Young Bucks at Double or Nothing 2022, Jeff and his brother Matt were scheduled for a tag title three-way ladder match, but had to be removed from said match when Jeff was again arrested for drunk driving on June 13th. Hardy blew a blood alcohol level of 0.291, way above Florida's legal limit of 0.08. He was taken off TV and has not been seen since, with Tony Khan saying Hardy would only be back if he completed his alcohol rehabilitation treatment and maintained his sobriety. As of this writing, Matt Hardy has said we're close to learning about Jeff Hardy's future, but nothing has been confirmed yet. Number 9, Excalibur uses the N-word. Let's keep the bad times rolling with this unfortunate incident. During the summer of 2020, old videos resurfaced of lead AEW announcer Excalibur using the N-word in a wrestling promo. The promo in question was from an old PWG show from 2003, and the clip resurfacing took Excalibur off TV for over a month. Excalibur made his return to AEW programming on the September 2nd, 2022 episode of Dynamite. This is now the second list in a row where I've had to include an entry about the N-word, and I hate it. I hate it more than I can possibly describe. Number 8, Matt Hardy at All Out 2020. The Matt Hardy and Sammy Guevara rivalry from 2020 may have had a run-in with an unsigned Danhausen, because this feud sure was cursed. Sammy's errant chair shot to Matt was one of the most gruesome moments in AEW's short history, and could have made it onto this list, but we felt it more appropriate to not include simple botches because otherwise we would be here all day. What happened at All Out 2020, while a botch it was, is another matter entirely. Within minutes of the start of their Last Man Standing Broken Rules match, Matt was speared off of a scissor me lift and smacked his head on the concrete below. How anyone thought this spot was a good idea is beyond me, but then this match was allowed to continue, with Hardy very clearly not being medically fit for any sort of performance. This match did have the stipulation attached that if Hardy lost, he would be forced to retire, so that more than likely played a role in its continuation, but there are always going to be other ways to get the result that you want in wrestling without endangering the talent involved, and this was an example of AEW having to make a split-second decision and making the wrong one. Number 7, Sammy Guevara and Eddie Kingston. That last entry may have been the first time Sammy Guevara's name has come up, but it won't be the last, although this is the most recent. Sammy Guevara's turn back to being a heel was the best move for him because I don't know if I've seen a more punchable face in wrestling since Oklahoma, and it seems Eddie Kingston agreed on that sentiment. After an AEW event, Sammy called Eddie a fat piece of shit, something Eddie took exception to as he felt it undermined their planned match at All Out 2022. Eddie confronted Sammy backstage, who was said to have smirked, and Eddie pie-faced Sammy, leading to a suspension. The summer of 2022 has not been kind to AEW, and another backstage altercation was not what the company needed, with the proposed match between the two being scrapped. Eddie and Sammy are said to have squashed their beef, but the incident did seem to take whatever wind the Eddie Kingston JAS rivalry had left out of its sails. Number 6, Thunder Rosa. Thunder Rosa is featured on this list already, but her incident with Ivelisse seemed to be much more on Ivelisse's part than hers. Since then, however, it appears to be a different story. Reports surfaced early in 2022 that Thunder Rosa was sandbagging her opponents. Sandbagging, for the uninitiated, means to not help your opponent lift you up for moves, resulting in spots looking incredibly awkward as one tries to hit a shoot suplex, which is very difficult to do if you're anyone not named Brock Lesnar. There has reportedly been a great deal of discontent in the AEW women's locker room this year, can't imagine why, but the more time goes by, the more it appears that Thunder Rosa's name is a common thread in this sadness sweater. And while this is yet to be more than a rumor, there is also a belief that Thunder Rosa's injury that caused her to miss All Out 2022 was merely a way of getting out of dropping the title in classic Shawn Michaels losing his smile fashion. The details of all of this have yet to come to light, but it seems as if AEW's women's division is heading for its breaking point. Maybe that will be given TV time. Number 5, Jonathan Gresham quits. Talk about a moment that's been completely lost in the shuffle of a ridiculous summer of news. Jonathan Gresham is one of the best technical wrestlers in the world and seemed primed for a big run in AEW and the newly purchased Ring of Honor going forward. He had a pair of matches in AEW against Dalton Castle and Lee Moriarty, and had his biggest title defense scheduled for Death Before Dishonor against Claudio Castagnoli. Unfortunately, the match and Claudio's title win were overshadowed on the night by the news that Gresham cussed out Tony Khan backstage over the booking of his character prior to the start of the show. Gresham still went ahead and dropped the title to Claudio, but has not appeared in AEW or ROH since then, instead wrestling sporadic indie matches, including a 4-way at Ric Flair's last match, The Show. Number 4, Big Swole and Tony Khan. While you rarely get to hear the genuine thoughts and opinions of many promoters in the wrestling business these days, that is not the case with Tony Khan, whose Twitter fingers could be diagnosed as a medical condition. Big Swole had a lot to say about the company when her contract wasn't extended in 2021, citing a lack of structure and diversity in AEW, which Tony Khan then took exception to. Tony responded to these comments, saying he let Swole's contract expire because he felt her wrestling wasn't good enough. I mean, this is a fine opinion for a promoter to have about their talent, that's his right, but the need to broadcast that opinion when a talent is already on their way out the door was received poorly by many in the business, especially when conversations about diversity in wrestling are so rarely given a chance to stand as necessary talking points to have. Number 3, Sammy Guevara and Sasha Banks. And here's Sammy again. In another case of old clips being dug up, Sammy Guevara found himself in very hot water on June 22, 2020, when a clip of him saying he wanted to sexually assault WWE star Sasha Banks was unearthed. Except he didn't say sexually assault, he said the R word that you definitely should not use in a joking manner. Guevara was suspended by AEW for a month while he underwent sensitivity training. Guevara apologized for his comments on his YouTube channel, while Sasha Banks posted to Twitter to say she and Sammy had engaged in an open discussion to ensure he understood the severity of what he had done. Guevara had been a primary part of Chris Jericho's Inner Circle act prior to the suspension, and was inserted right back into the group upon his return on July 22, 2020, costing Jurassic Express a match against Jericho and Jake Hager while being disguised as Serpentico. Number 2, MJF. The souring of MJF on AEW is where a lot of the vibes started changing with the company in 2022, at least for me personally. Reports of a massive backstage fight between MJF and Tony Khan began to emerge as Khan was cross at MJF for doing an interview with Ariel Helwani without company permission he would have granted if asked. MJF's issues, however, were much deeper than that. While we don't know what was said in that room verbatim, MJF's frustrations with not being given a raise were said to be a key point of contention. MJF continued on his way doing business until everything came to a head the week of Double or Nothing 2022. MJF no-showed a meet and greet and had a plane ticket to go home that would have seen him miss the pay-per-view and his blow-off match with Wardlow. He didn't get on the flight, he went to the building and was squashed. Then on TV a few days later, he called Tony Khan a mark before walking out of the company. He would return it all out, but the whole ordeal greatly undermined Wardlow's rise to prominence. We will only now see the payoff of this angle and determine if it was worth it. At number 1, the Suzuki incident. Never has there ever been a bigger scandal in pro wrestling than All Elite Wrestling cutting Minoru Suzuki's entrance short on the September 8th, 2021 episode of Dynamite. Well, except for number 1, CM Punk. What a difference a year makes. In the words of the great George Costanza, this was supposed to be the summer of Punk. Punk's AEW championship run never got off the ground as he sat out with a broken foot. When he came back, he decided this company hadn't had enough drama this year and launched AEW into turmoil. He shot on Hangman Page in his return promo as a receipt for Page making a comment about workers' rights, a comment Punk took in slight as a comment against his murky history with Colt Cabana. And then after beating Jon Moxley at All Out, things got real bad. Punk shot hard on Cabana, Hangman, the Elite, dropping F-bombs galore while eating a cupcake into the mic. While Tony Khan was sitting there wide-eyed wondering what exactly was happening to his once happy-go-lucky wrestling company, a security guard ran off after Punk was finished to break up a massive brawl between the Elite, Punk, and Punk's trainer Ace Steel. As of this writing, everyone involved has been stripped of their championships and suspended, while the belief is that CM Punk may indeed be done with the company. It remains to be seen what the long-term ramifications of this skirmish will be, but this is the lowest point that the company has faced to date, 1 year removed from the greatest night in the company's history. What a difference a year makes. And that's our list. If you liked it, you masochist, I don't know what's wrong with you, but like this video and give us a subscribe just so you don't miss out on any other more cheerful lists in the future. Make sure that you click on one of them, it's on screen right now. We'll put up a good one. We'll make sure it's as nice and cheerful as possible. I'm gonna go and talk to my friend Sad. He's great. I need cheering up now.